So what an interesting weekend it was in the Canadian Premier League this past weekend, and I'll be breaking it all down right here in this video for my Matchday 3 review part, which is the first half of this video. My last half of the video will be my preview for this coming Matchday 4, as well as my preview for this coming Wednesday's Canadian Championship Leg 1 matches there. So that's going to be pretty cool. You want to stay tuned for that in the last half of the episode. But the first half first, I'll be reviewing this past weekend with my ups and downs. So if a club did well, I'll tell you why and give them an up. If they did not so well and pretty bad, I'll give them a down and I'll give you reasons why. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Now let's kick it all off with the first up. So then my first up here is going to Forge FC. They were an up this week in the Matchday 3 for the CPL because they finally did it. They got their first win. So congratulations. The club finally got its first win. Took them 3 matches, which is kind of weird since they were kind of the favorites coming into the CPL. I definitely thought they were one of the giants already off the bat for the CPL. When in Matchday 3, they had 2 matches, lost Kyle Becker to suspension for both of them, but they were able to overlook that and come out with a big, huge 3-0 win last week, midweek, against Pacific FC at home. And then this past Sunday at home, they unfortunately did drop a 2-1 result to Cavs there, but nevertheless they actually looked really well, or really good in both those matches. I thought they're really great together, especially in that match against the Cavs. There was times where I really thought they could have taken over the matches, and if they would have scored, you know, a few more inches to the left or right with those balls, they would have scored and probably would have won the match. So definitely a huge up for Forge FC. They look like they're now trending in that right direction that they need to go. Down. So the Halifax Wanderers, unfortunately, will have to be my first of only 2 downs this week, and that is because, you know, they only played the 1 match this past Saturday. They're on the road in Winnipeg, and they actually played fairly well, but the reason why I'm giving them a down is because they didn't get the 3 points. They did have a bit of a slow start. The first 30 minutes of that match Saturday in Winnipeg against Valor, they did start off pretty slowly there, and they had, you know, at the start of even the second half, the first couple minutes there were kind of mostly the Valor, but the final 20 and 25 minutes for sure of that second half of the match on Saturday, they definitely at times played really well against Valor. I'd even say kind of outplayed them at times at the very end of that match, and were buzzing. They looked like they were creating a lot of momentum at the end, but unfortunately they couldn't capitalize on that, and because of that they dropped 3 points on the road, and that's why they're down this week. Up. My next up this week is going to be with Cavalry FC over in Calgary there. They ended up playing 2 matches last week, one midweek against Valor at home. They got a 1-0 win in that match, getting a great looking goal at the end. And then of course on Sunday they went into Hamilton for their first ever road match and got a win in Hamilton, a big 2-1 decisive win. They got a late winner, like literally at the very end of the game they scored the game-winning match or goal there. And so it was a crazy match though. They definitely at times they looked like they could have actually lost that match to Forge FC and even to Valor FC in midweek. I mean, they played really well. Cavs, don't get me wrong, and they definitely deserve to be you know, undefeated so far. The only undefeated team right now left in the Canadian Premier League season at a perfect 3-0 right now and sitting atop the table, 9 points, and because of that they're ultimate opportunists this week. That's why, you know, they're able to have the 1 opportunity, the 1 slip up for Valor, they got the goal on that one, and of course they had 2 really good opportunities that they capitalized on Sunday against Forge FC, and that's why they got the 2 wins. That's why they're sitting atop the table and the league at perfect 3-0 with 9 points, and that's why they're an up this week. Down. Now my last down for Matchday 3 ends up going to Pacific FC, and the reasoning why here is because Pacific FC had the possession in both of their matches and they still lost, and they couldn't even score any of those 2 matches, which goes to show you that what I said last week was right, that possession isn't everything. They had a little over 50%, about 52-53% of possession in the match midweek last week against Forge FC, lost 3-0, and then on Sunday in Edmonton, yes, they're on the road for both matches, but still they own possession again with, I think it was something like 60-63% possession on Sunday against FC Edmonton, and they still lost that one, or at least didn't lose that one, but they dropped points in that one in a 0-0 draw. So I mean, they only got 1 point out of the last 2 matches. They did lose Marcus Haber to injury. Starzarek is still out with injury, but I mean, still they had opportunities where they could have finished it. They just couldn't finish it. I know it's funny to hear, but they couldn't finish it in the final third, and they couldn't score goals, and that's why they dropped points, and that's why they only got 1 point, and that's why they're a down from my Matchday 3. Up. So my next up here goes to Valor FC from Winnipeg, and for them this week it is an up. I was considering giving them a down actually, just because they didn't get the win midweek last week when they played against the Cavs. They lost unfortunately 1-0. You know, they did play really good defensively. They definitely got outshot, definitely got outpossessed in that match, but then they kind of bounced back on Saturday, at least in the first half, by you know, taking over the match. In the first 50 minutes of Saturday's match, they were able to score a goal against the Wanderers, and then all of a sudden the last 40 minutes of the second half of their home match on Saturday against the Wanderers, they kind of fell apart a little bit, let the Wanderers back in the match. But because of the supporters, they were able to hold on to a convincing 1-0 win at the end. That and good defensive play. So at the end of the day, you know, Valor kind of was down to start it off after the first match, kind of finished out on a high note, getting the win, getting the 3 points, and getting back in the win column out of that unfortunate 2-match losing streak that they had coming into Saturday. They got a win. They're ending off match day 3 on an up. Now, as we're getting toward the end of the 17 preview, the next one here is FC Edmonton, and I really actually originally didn't know if I would give them an up or a down. It was kind of a coin flip. Ended up being an up though, because if you look at it, they did go down to 10 men on their roster on the field about a half hour into the match, and they're still able to hold on through the final 60 minutes and not get scored on, which is pretty impressive against a possession-based team like Pacific FC. Although I did mention earlier in this recap here that Pacific FC do have a bit of a problem finishing, and FC Edmonton definitely, you know, their good defensive play definitely stopped Pacific FC from scoring any goals on them, and they were able to hold them down to a 0-0 draw there in their home opener on Sunday. Definitely felt like they could have maybe, you know, scored a little bit more, but at the same time they were down to 10 men, and this is why they're an up this week. Now the final up here is going to go to York 9. Now they didn't play, they had the bye week, I guess you could say, this week, but that's an up for them because, you know, they do have the injuries. There's a big one to Kyle Porter there, who's in the starting 11, missed match day 2 because of it. He should be healthy and hopefully ready to go coming into match day 4, as well as their midweek clash in the Canadian Cup Championship there. And then of course on top of that, they had Manny Aparicio, who was out for the last match due to the suspension because he got a red card in the inaugural match there, so he should all be back. But now they have a full week of, you know, to get healthy, to get back on the training ground. They got a draw and then a loss in their second match, so they're kind of in the bottom of the table with just 1 point right now, but they still have 8 matches to go, quite a few matches, quite a few home matches, so hopefully having this week off to just kind of breathe and get back into it, I think that should be enough for York 9, and that completes my weekend recap. Now it's time for the most prestigious player of the week announcement, and that is the A.F.C. Curtis Gem of the Week. And with that, my A.F.C. Curtis Gem of the Week goes to Tristan Borges of Forge FC, who scored the lone goal on Sunday's match for Forge FC in that 2-1 defeat. That he did actually really well in that match. Thought it was his best match of the season so far. I think he's actually been one of the top players and consistent players for Forge FC this season. He did get benched in that first match of match day 3, but came back strong with that goal finally, and his best performance in total on Sunday. So congratulations, Tristan Borges. You're this week's A.F.C. Curtis Gem of the Week. So it's predictions time here in the episode. I'm going to kick things off with the Canadian Championship prediction. That's right, it is back here, folks, for the summer with the first round, first leg matches, which are happening on Wednesday, May 15th there. And the first of 3 matches that week is going to be Vaughan Azzurri hosting the HFX Wanderers in Vaughan. I don't know if Vaughan, you know, if they have a whole lot to really take on the Wanderers this year. At least they lost quite a bit of their roster to Canadian Premier League clubs swooping in and signing them, like Dylan Sacramento, Dylan Carrero, Austin Rickey. The list goes on. Like half the team is in the Canadian Premier League now, and that's going to hurt their chances. I don't see a whole lot of Wanderers starting. I see a lot of younger guys like Lamy and Oxner and Firth getting the start and getting some minutes, and therefore I do think, though, at the end of the day, the Wanderers will come out with a convincing 2-0 win. The next Canadian Championship match is AS Blainville hosting York 9. So Blainville hasn't really had a whole lot of turnover like maybe Vaughan had from 2 years ago, but this year's club is missing one of their top stars from last year in Diande Abzi. I'm super sorry if I butchered that name, but Abzi did go this past offseason to York 9 of whole team, so it's kind of funny that they're playing each other in the opening round here. I think Abzi does start for York 9. I think you see a bunch of other young stars start for York 9 like Estevez and Austin Rickey, and at the end of the day, I do think York 9 comes out with a convincing win in this one as well. 2-0 final for York 9. Now the final Canadian Championship match midweek is going to be Pacific FC versus Cavalry FC in Spruce Meadows. So the Cavs versus P.F.C, the first ever Canadian Premier League club versus Canadian Premier League club in the Canadian Championship tournament here, and I do think it's going to be a really good matchup. Although if you kind of look at it right now, Pacific FC aren't coming in with a whole lot of depth. They have some injuries to some key players, Starzek as their center back being one of them, and of course Marcus Haber, their top forward, being another one. So that's going to hurt their cause there. They did rest some players this past weekend in preparation for this match, and I'm sure this tournament is going to be important to them. But unfortunately, they did run up against a good Cavs team that have some really good solid depth, and who really didn't show a whole lot of it on the weekend, and might not even show it this coming weekend when they play in the El Classico. And so that's why I think, unfortunately, they're going to be at home. I think Cavs are rolling right now with a whole lot of momentum. They're undefeated in the Canadian Premier League, and I think they're even undefeated in preseason. So they really haven't even lost or even got a draw, really. So I think at the end of the day, the Cavs will win this first leg 2-0. We move on to our first Canadian Premier League match, and that's Valor FC hosting Forge FC. So this match in Winnipeg this coming Thursday is going to be pretty big because it is got CONCACAF League qualification purpose to it. So it's going to be huge for these two clubs, and Forge now is certain they come into this with some momentum. They're kind of rolling. Meanwhile, Valor, on the other hand, the last two matches, maybe even three matches, they haven't looked all too well, getting 2 losses in the last 3 matches. And even that match against Halifax on Saturday, they didn't end and probably the way they wanted it to end, as you've seen the momentum switch to the Halifax team there. But I think with Forge FC rolling in with some momentum and Valor coming in kind of on some uneven footing right now, I do think, and it's, by the way, it's also their 5th match in 16 days, so you gotta think that maybe they're gonna get some tired legs for sure in this match. They did rest some guys the last 2 matches, but I don't know if it'll help even at home. Unfortunately, I do see an upset here. Forge FC winning 2-1 over Valor. So this next matchup here is Pacific FC hosting York 9. So Pacific FC is hosting York 9 in this Saturday, May 18th matchup here, and it's going to be pretty big. I do think because of tired legs and some injuries on Pacific FC's side, along with they're kind of in a rough patch right now where they can't really finish in the final third. It's going to hurt them against a really good defensive counter-attacking team like York 9, who I don't think will be playing a whole lot of starters in their Canadian Championship matchup midweek, and therefore I think York 9 will come out with a upside type victory here, 1-0 win on the road. Now the final match is Cavalry FC hosting FC Edmonton. So it's finally here, guys, finally the best rivalry in the Canadian Premier League so far in 2019, and as the El Classico, Calgary versus Edmonton, Cavs versus the Eddies, and I think it's going to be obviously it's in Spruce Meadows, but I think it's going to be a pretty tight, hard knocks type of match. There's going to be probably a lot of cards, maybe even a red or 2 reds in this match, on both sides maybe. It's going to be pretty chippy, and it's going to be fun to watch. So you're going to want to tune in and watch it this coming Saturday. And with it, I think it's going to be mostly possession based for the Cavs. I think they're going to own the ball, but I think FC Edmonton on the counter attack will strike at least once on Mr. Carducci there for the Cavs. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a really tight one, especially considering the Cavs do have a midweek matchup against Pacific FC, so that might give them some tired legs. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to finish with a 1-1 draw. Alright guys, so that was my video, my review of last weekend, and then my preview for this coming weekend. Let me know your ups and downs for match day 3, as well as your predictions for this coming weekend's matches down in the comment section below. Oh, and did you hear, I'm going to have a mailbag episode coming up in just a few weeks here at the end of May. And so I want to hear from you guys. Submit me your questions. You can DM me. You can even ask me, possibly even down in the comment section, or you can again DM me over at any of my social media platforms. The tags are going to be right up here at A.F.C. Curtis on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, though, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. The thumbs up shows me you like this video. And if you want to see more content just like this, maybe consider hitting that red subscribe button. Oh yeah, and also you can watch my videos over at northernstarting11.com. So you're going to click that link down in the description below. It's got some bunch of great soccer podcasts and vlogs all about the Canadian game, in the beautiful game of soccer. So you're going to want to check that out down at the link below. And until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching.